Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
ഓക്കെ, ആർക്കെങ്കിലും ടെക്നിക്കൽ ഡിഫിക്കൽട്ടി ഫീൽ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ടോ? ഇപ്പൊ ഇവിടെ ഒരു ചെറിയ ബോക്സ് വന്നിരുന്നു, എന്തോ ടെക്നിക്കൽ. ഇത് ആരോ ഒരാളുടെ ടെക്നിക്കൽ ഇത് ഉണ്ടല്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് ഇപ്പൊ ഒരു മെസ്സേജ് ഇവിടെ വന്നിരുന്നു, ആർക്കോ ഒരാൾക്ക്. കാരണം because it is recording, it is giving me some messages. Anyway, we will be starting with, I hope all the 14 can see me or even hear me at least. So today we will be discussing about the evolution of curriculum studies. No, actually, yesterday in the last class we have seen what a curriculum is basically, and as you all know that curriculums studies as a course may be a novice kind of an experience for you. So far in your B.Ed program, you haven't acquainted with curriculum studies. So here in this course, we will be acquainting what curriculum studies is, how it is evolved, and then what are the major influences of curriculum studies, what are the major theoretical perspectives of curriculum studies, and all these things we will discuss here. Okay. I think yesterday in the last class we have discussed about curriculum studies, actually, curriculum studies. And in this class, today we will discuss about curriculum studies, how curriculum studies has become a subject of study. How curriculum has become a subject of study. That's what we are going to discuss today. Russia, okay. Okay, so curriculum studies is basic. Can you see the slide now?
No, sir.
Sir. No, sir.
Now, can you see it now?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
yes. Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay. So, curriculum studies is a field of study about curriculum and instruction concerned with understanding curricula as an active force of human educational experiences. So that's what the basic essence of curriculum studies. All kinds of educational experiences that we come across in an educational institution has its origin basically from the core aspect of curriculum. So understanding curricula as the most detrimental aspect of educational system, as the backbone of educational system, is the basic assumption of curriculum studies. So all kinds of educational experiences which are happening in an educational institutions are deriving out of its basic seed of curriculum. So considering the importance of curriculum as the source of all kinds of educational experiences in a curriculum, starting from school to college, is the basic essence of curriculum studies. So we have seen that we have in an educational experiences we have methodology, teaching methodology, we have evaluation, we have syllabus, we have content, we have school as a total environment, we have experiences outside the classroom, we have experiences inside the classroom but not directly linked to the formal syllabuses which are given to the students. But all these experiences encompassing, we used to call it as curriculum. As many of you have discussed the meaning of curriculum in that way, basically. So curriculum studies is basically an inquiry, is as a field of inquiry that dig out more and more information about curriculum as an active force of experience. So uh, that's what basically curriculum studies is. For admitting Shashwati, I have to go back again. I'm sharing it back. Can you see now? Can you see it now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So because if somebody requests for joining, I have to again go back to the screen. So I may sometimes in between go back. Now, what are the basic specific questions related to curriculum? So that's what we are going to look into. You know, this particular field of study as curriculum study, even if we don't have a kind of a system where we do not study curriculum study for our studies for our B.Ed or maybe for the elementary education teacher training programs or D.Ed and so on, but you should understand one thing: curriculum studies is a major field, is a major area of inquiry, or even it has established as a separate subject other than education in most of the European countries. Say, for example, if you look at the cases of Harvard University, if you look at the case of Madison University, Stanford University, University of California, and Columbia University, wherever you go, you can see a particular department. The name of the department would be Department of Curriculum Studies or School of Curriculum Studies. So they give Master of Arts in Curriculum Studies, MA in Curriculum Studies. So curriculum studies has grown up in such a way that it has established itself as an independent subject. Like you study history, like you study economics, mathematics, and so on. Curriculum studies is an independent area. So I just wanted to share with you the prominence and the importance of curriculum studies has grown in such a way that it has itself become an important area of subject or a field of study. You know, when you look at the major thinkers who has worked in this particular area, starting from, you can see that John Dewey was a great educationalist who has contributed to curriculum studies. And you can see that, Franklin Bobbitt is another important person who has contributed to curriculum studies. And then you can see that, Bruner is another important person who has worked a lot in curriculum and the importance of curriculum. Of course, Piaget and then Vygotsky. Then we can see that the latest, critical school theory like Paulo Freire, and then many progressive schools of thought like modernism, postmodernism, and critical race theory. All these schools have come up and they have their own perspectives about how a curriculum should look like. So when all these perspectives have when all these schools have a perspective of how a curriculum should look like, automatically what happened, the literature about curriculum studies has enormously grown up. People have started writing about it. When you look at the postmodern literature or the modern literature or a post-structural literature, post-structuralism related literature, you can see a lot of contributions to the field of curriculum. So they all have viewed school and education and curriculum as an important components that determines the destiny of human beings. That determines the destiny of human being. So, so we will look into the basic essential forces or the basic questions that drive curriculum studies. I have listed mainly 3 questions, but if you go deep into that, you will see that these 3 questions will further, ramified into several other questions. So the first question is, what should be taught in schools? That's an important question that curriculum studies asks. What should be taught in a school? And then another important question is, why should it be taught, to whom should it be taught. So these are the second important questions. And then third, what does it mean to be educated, mean to be an educated, how an educated person will look like. This is another important question. When you look at all these questions together, we can see that what content should be taught in the schools has become an important area of debate and discussion for the educationalists, not only educationalists, but also for the social scientists and scientists from time immemorial. Basically, what should be taught, what should we teach in our schools? Whose knowledge should be taught and whose knowledge should not be taught? So these issues has become pertinent issues that curriculum studies thinkers and philosophers started discussing. Say, for example, in your syllabus, say when you look at your school syllabus, or maybe degree syllabus, or any kind of syllabus, you can see that there are certain theories. Say, for example, you study the theory of Isaac Newton, you study the theory of Einstein, and then you study the theory of different great philosophers. You study different theories of evolution of the earth and then universe and all these kind of things. The question is, who decided that these things should be taught in the school? This is the pertinent question. Who decided that this should be taught in the school? For example, when you take the case of teacher education, we all, while discussing about I'm sorry, when we discuss about writing lesson plan and instructional objectives, we know that we all list the instructional objectives or the taxonomy of the instructional objectives as suggested by Benjamin S. Bloom. Benjamin Bloom. Who decided that Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy of instructional objectives should be taught to our students? And is it the only taxonomy that we have come across in this so far in the history of education? Is it the only one? Or is there any development after Benjamin Bloom, other than the revised Benjamin Bloom? Is there any other development which is happening across the world about writing new instructional objectives, setting curricular objectives, and so on? These all are very important questions. Say, for example, when you look at it, the instructional objective designing has undergone structural change in our modern era. You can see that William G. Spady, a famous American, American educationalist, I would say educationalist, has brought out the idea of learning outcomes, outcome-based education. He proposed the idea of outcome-based education. So he proposes certain outcomes, how an outcome should be written, what is the importance of outcome for framing our education system. All these kind of things are discussed by William G. Spady in his masterpiece work, which was published in 1994, I believe. So all these developments are happening, but of course there should be some kind of instructional objectives which are put forward, maybe from our own country, maybe from different Asian countries. Why we are not studying all this is an important question. This is a very important question. So what should be taught? I'm sorry. So what should be taught is an important question that we ask in curriculum studies continuously. When you look at the methods of teaching or the models of teaching, we come across the models like, Bruner's concept attainment model, Synetic model for improving creativity, Ausubel's advanced organizer model, and several other models we come across, isn't it? Jurisprudential model and several other models we come across. But I just wanted to tell you an effective methodology which was happening in India during independence. It was like, during the independence movement in India, when you take the case of Indian independence movement, you know that our freedom fighters, like starting from from the early freedom fighters to the late 1947. We can see that we have a great deal of freedom fighters starting from Tilakan and then Bal Gangadhar Tilakan, Lal Bal Pal, Mahatma Gandhi, Subhash Chandra Bose, and so many, and so a good luminaries of great freedom fighters were there for our Indian freedom movement, independent movement. And I'll tell you, say for example, Bhagat Singh, you take the case of Bhagat Singh, or you take the case of Subhash Chandra Bose, whoever it be, you take any one case. If they wanted to attract Indian youth to the freedom movement, independent movement, it was not so easy for them at that time, because you just imagine that we all are in British India. You just imagine now, the nation is ruled by British. Now, what do I think or you think is that if I study well, I get a British government job. Somebody is asking for joining. So if I study well, I will get a government job. So British government job. Sometimes I may get a civil servant job or maybe some clerical job, something of that job. So once I get a job, my future is safe and secure. So I can do the job, I can enjoy a good family life. But if I plunge into the freedom movement, what will happen? My future is gone. I will be put in jail, and sometimes even I will be hanged or you will be hanged. All this kind of risks are there, and your family will suffer, because when you are abducted, your family will be tortured by the police. All these kind of issues are there. So which is the better option? Everyone will think that study well, get a job in British government. It is with this attitude of the people that Subhash Chandra Bose and Bhagat Singh, Tilakan, and all these people have to attract Indian youth to the independence movement. That too, when do they do? Can they go to the classroom and then teach? No. They have to go to the underground. Most often they contact people at the midnight, in the darkness. They sit with the people. And do they have masses of people listening, waiting to listen to them? Like you see in the Kozhikode beach, lakhs of people muster together for listening to a single speech. No, it's not happening, because if they come out, police will came to know, they will be arrested. So what they have to do, they have to go to small villages, muster 3-4 people, or maybe 5-6 people, or maybe 10 people maximum, sit in the shade of darkness in a lonely place, talk to this youth, convince them that you should get into freedom fight. So what was the methodology used by our Indian freedom fighters? What is that methodology? Of course, that is a powerful methodology, because only a powerful methodology can take a person along with the teacher. So these powerful methodologies are not being analyzed thoroughly, basically. That's what we say. So my point of argument is that when we talk about different kinds of methodology, different kinds of models of teaching, we all should remember that there are models and methodologies which are ignored across the world, in different corners of the world. There are ignored pedagogies. There are neglected pedagogies across the world. Why we are learning only this in our syllabus? This is the question that curriculum study scholars ask. Why this syllabus consists of only this one? Why this syllabus consists only post-colonial or pre-colonial or colonial history? Or why is being taught in this particular fashion? what is the reason for teaching it? That's another important, very important question. What is the reason for teaching this particular objective? In curriculum studies, in curriculum, we always used to keep curricular objectives. The curricular objective is to develop understanding, develop critical thinking among the students about models of teaching, and so on. We used to keep it there. Why do we develop a critical understanding about only this particular course content? This is an important question. Why do we develop only a critical outlook? Why are we not intending to develop a new course, new pedagogy? So all these kind of statements of curricular objectives and the content which is included in the curriculum and the activities and experiences given to the students as part of curricular transaction, all these need to be thoroughly questioned and investigated. This is the basic idea of curriculum studies. And then curriculum studies basically ask the question, what does it mean to be an educated person? What does it mean to be an educated person? So does it mean that a person with this much number of years of age and a certificate in his hand or her hand is an educated person? Is that educated person what does means? So what does it mean by educated person? So all these are important questions asked by this curriculum studies. When we look at the history of curriculum and the history of schooling, we can see that history of schooling itself has its origin from the political interest of the dominant class in our society. When you go back to the history of schooling, you can see that the schooling has originated during the Industrial Revolution. What does it set stage for an industrial revolution? What does it set stage for an industrial revolution? Do you know that? I'm asking you. Huh? What does it set a stage? No idea? Nobody has any idea about how does this industrial revolution break out? Okay. Beginning of transaction with goods. Okay. Beginning of transaction with goods. Okay. Technical advancement, of course. Okay. 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 Of course, there are. I would say that the steam engine. Who discovered steam engine? Prasanna. Exactly. Steam power. Steam engine. Who discovered steam engine? Who discovered? James what?
Thomas Savery.
Thomas?
Savery.
Thomas? Salary.
Savery.
Thomas Savery. James what? What? James what? Engine steam engine.
Yeah. Yes.
Thomas Savery
Yes.
Thomas?
Steam pressure, something like that.
Okay, James.
Not sure.
James Watt ആണ് steam engine. James Wattന്റെ steam engine ഡിസ്കവറിയോട് കൂടിയിട്ടാണ് ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഇൻഡസ്ട്രിയൽ റെവല്യൂഷൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ഐഡിയ ബ്രേക്ക് ഔട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നത് ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ. അപ്പോൾ they have identified so far that time people do believed that energy can come out of only human battery. That means if you wanted to move a particular commodity from one place to another place, human battery must be there. I have to take it on my shoulder or on my head, and then I have to take it from one place to another place. Otherwise, there is no way out of it. Human battery. So, human battery was renewable battery actually. Cotton industry started in India during the industrial. Of course, of course, of course. The British people have started cotton industries after the outbreak of industrial revolution in Britain. That's true. And then this was a lot of difficulty. Or maybe you pull in a rickshaw. That also is human battery. These all are renewable batteries actually, renewable energy. Then finally, it's an easy way of moving things, exerting energy on the commodity so that we can move the thing, we can travel. This steam engine was discovered. When steam engine was discovered, that was a great revolutionary invention, and as a result, this industrial revolution became faster and was outbroken, and then industries become order of the day. It has grown in an exponential way. As a result of this industrial, I'm just going to tell you about the history of how this formal schooling has emerged and the politics of this formal schooling, and then how it has an implication for curriculum study. That's what the basic purpose of this discussion. When this industrial revolution was broken out, what was needed for the industrial masters was that industrial masters needs laborers to work in their factory. They need laborers to work in their factory. So what kind of laborers? They need laborers who can operate machines, because as a result, as Cyril said, cotton industries were started in India. Cotton industries, cotton factories were started. So there are huger and huger factories were there. And for operating these factories, human labor is needed. It's not that the British people or the masters can manage all the machines. Machines are huge machines, so that managing this machine needs human power, human resources. So who will master it? Only the human labor. Where do you get human labor at that time, during the time of Industrial Revolution? All the people knows only one job, that was agriculture. Nothing else, only agriculture. So from where do you get the people for this particular activity, means kind of factory related activity? You have to draw people from agriculture sector. You have to take people from agriculture sector. Otherwise, there is no way. So we have, what we do, factory masters and industrial masters, they have offered large amount of salary, more money, said that you don't have to work hard in the field. You just come and then oversee the functioning of the machines, and then you sit with it. So they were attracted. This agrarian labor society was attracted with more money, and cottage system was developed as a result of that. Cottages near the factories, they have given cottages. They started it. What they faced, the industrial masters faced a major difficulty with this agrarian laborers. They should have minimum sense of how to operate a machine, but that was not with them. So then they give them little training. So they learned it, how to manage the machines and support the machines. And second problem was that, these people do not have certain values which an industrial society needs, because industrial society essentially demand certain values to be inculcated, to be possessed by an individual who is living in an industrial society. What are those values? Those values were mainly, punctuality, repetition, and the obedience. These are the three major values which were demanded by all industrial societies at that particular time. But these people were from agricultural society. They do not have punctuality. They do not have a master, because they were doing farming in their own land. So they were their own master, and then they were not so happy about doing the same kind of job every time. So they are laborers. Sometimes, one season they will do one paddy farm, the next season they will do banana farm, and the third season they will do something else. So they were, quite not very routine-based people, but they do a deal of activities as part of their. In between, they will have celebrations, celebrations like Vishu as a result of cultivation, something of that sort. Different celebrations were there. So this was where it was a jolly life at that time. So agrarian industrial society cannot permit it. So what they do, they have designed a curriculum. They have designed a system which was called a school, and they believed that this school should inculcate certain values that the younger generation of this laborers should acquire with. And what are they? Basically and apparently, they said it should consist of, science, little mathematics, little English, little history, economics, and something of that sort. So this was called as visible curriculum. And behind this visible curriculum, what they have kept, which was more prominent and important than the visible curriculum, was these three values. That means punctuality, repetition, and obedience. These three values were more pertinent for the industrial society than the visible curriculum. Why? Because you take the case of punctuality. I'll take the case of punctuality. This has been detailedly discussed by the famous writer of the Future Shock in the third book, Alvin Toffler, in one of his books, Third Wave. He has discussed this particular issue in detail. Take the case of punctuality. In a factory, just take the case of a factory. You take the case of this Google Meet. Take the case of Google Meet. I start Google Meet by 10:30. Okay, you just imagine. None of you joins by 10:30. Just imagine. I'm not telling about our case. You just imagine. I start by 10:30. Nobody starts by 10:30. You all start by 10:45, 10:50, 11 or something of that. Half an hour. What will happen? I have to get it open by 10:30 because I told you that classes will start by 10:30. Nobody joins it. It doesn't mean that I can only open at 10:45. I have to start by 10:30. Okay. So what will happen? My data is exhausting. So wastage. So because of the absence of the laborers, the master's energy get wasted in an industrial factory. You understand it? Say when a factory machine is switched on, what will happen? Machine, they say working time is 10 to 5. 10 o'clock machine will open. By the time 2 people will come, 10 people will not come. Or otherwise, you just imagine 5 people will come, 5 people will not come. A machine wanted to get the support of all the 10 to get its full utilization, but only 5 people have turned up. What will happen? Industrial masters will face loss. Industry will become in loss. Because machine will work, for that electricity is needed, fuel is needed, all this will work, but people are not there. They will join only by 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock. So what industrial masters did is that we should teach this punctuality to this younger generation. Understand? So what they did, they decided to include punctuality as a hidden curriculum in the school curriculum. Then they decided, in factory, they were facing difficulty. These people will come at 11 o'clock, 11, because they do not know the value of time. Then factory people installed the sirens. Sirens, have you heard sirens? Big sirens will be there near the factory. Sirens will come. So 9 o'clock, there is a big siren. Yes. Then all the people will join for job. When 1 o'clock, there is a big siren, they will go for break, lunch. Similarly, these people were controlled with the sirens. So modeling the sirens which are used by the factories, schools used another strategy to teach punctuality to the school students. That was bell. Ding, 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 ding. bells. And this bell system was actually a modeling of the factory's siren system. That means factory owners believed that, industrialists believed that these younger generation in the schools are supposed to be the labor force for tomorrow's industries and factories. So they should be taught punctuality. They should understand the value of punctuality. So if the student doesn't turn up by sharp 10 o'clock with a long bell, we will give punishment, beaten, will flag people, and then punishments will be, we will keep them outside for some time. So by using punishment and then all these kind of activities, we started inculcating punctuality in the schools, among our children. So punctuality was gradually developed. So then later on, what will happen? You know what happened? Punctuality will become a virtue immediately. In the pre-industrial society, punctuality was not a virtue. But when these factory owners were in need of punctuality, in the industrial society, punctuality has become a virtue, become a great value. Gandhi was punctual. But our Kirtana knows this theory earlier. That's why she is not very punctual always, I believe. Kirtana? Kirti? She is there? Kirti is not there. She has left. Kirti Krishnan is there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's why I was not scolding in spite of, any sound problem for you, Kirti? Still it is remaining sound problem. So this reciprocity is the major problem of online classroom. So when we ask a question, it takes a lot of time to get responded. That's not your problem. Of course, there's a problem of the medium. That means online medium. Anyway, we hope that we all will be able to open it up soon. Okay. Anyway, so this is what, when Gandhi was a person who valued punctuality as the great value, because Gandhi was the product of an industrial society. He was taught in an industrial system. He was developed in an industrial system. So I was telling that this punctuality was a value only in an industrial society. Only in an industrial society. Now take the case of the second value, which is repetition. Take the case of repetition. Repetition is another important value in the industrial society, because in factory, if you're working with a machine, you have to work with that machine throughout the life. Till you are retiring from there, you have to work with that life. You just imagine a machine. See, take the case of a driver. Joined as a driver in a university or in a factory. Till retirement, what is his job? The same job. Joined as a clerk. Till retirement, what is his job? Clerical job. Till retirement. His salary may increase. His designation may change, but the job is same. Same kind of job. In factory, people have to work with these machines. Have you seen in the famous movie of Charlie Chaplin? It means, what is that name of the movie? Industrial Revolution, or Charlie Chaplin working in a factory. Modern times, correct, modern times. So in modern times, Charlie Chaplin, is working with a machine, in an industrial line, things will come. Job of Charlie Chaplin is to do this with this spanner like this. So he is doing it continuously throughout the life. He has to do like this. And when it is the time for lunch, he is going to the lunchroom like this. He's not, that because you become a machine. You become a repetitive machine like this. Your job is doing like this, but when you go home also you will do like this. Which challenge happens modern times depicts this very clearly. How industrial societies convert human being into a repetitive organism. It's been very well shown in that particular film, Modern Times. Yeah. So yes, Sufyan. And then man become repetitive human being. You should not be bored by repetition. That's the policy of industrial masters. Because you know what will happen if you are bored. You will make protest. If you are so much of bored, you make protest. So when you protest, what will happen? That will stop the industrial production. Understand? See, in hostels and all, how does this protest has come down in the modern education institutions? When I was a college boy, always there will be protests. Every schools and colleges are, maybe in a month there will be one protest, one strike, and there will be one definite holiday for us because of strike. But now, this modern times, it has not been practiced, mainly because at that time, after the college or class, we just go home. We have nothing to do with. We just either play with, or maybe after playing, we have a lot of time to think about what is happening in the college. And then in the hostel, we have a lot of time to think about what's happening in the college, what's happening in the classroom, what's happening around. We were all thinking about it. But now, so we were all bored by, sitting for a long time, and boring was a major issue. But now, what happens? People are not bored. Modern society has given WhatsApp to them, Facebook to them, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and then audio songs and all this. So you are not bored. When you are bored of a film, you go to a music. When you're bored of music, you go to Facebook. And then you have, when you even still you are bored with all this, you go to a cafe coffee shop and have a cup of coffee, and then have a, donut or something of that sort. So you're not bored. This modern society has given so much to remove your boring. What happens as a result? You have no time to think about what's happening around you. So boring will create protest sometimes. So to avoid this boring, these industrial masters proposed that schools should inculcate repetition as a habit, as a good habit, repetition. Do the same thing again and again and again and again and again. That's repetition. So when we wanted to teach about the poem of Robert Frost, Woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. This poem is taught in such a fashion that read this poem 20 times. First time, second time, third time, you will repeat, you will repeat, you will repeat, you will repeat, you will repeat. And then gradually your parents will tell you, and the teachers will tell you that repetition makes man perfect. Just a minute, hold on. Hello, Supriya, ഞാനൊരു ക്ലാസ്, ഞാൻ ഓൺലൈൻ ക്ലാസ്സിലാണ്, ഞാൻ ഇത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് വിളിക്കാം കേട്ടോ. So, so then your parents and teachers started telling you, practice makes man perfect. That means you have to practice it 100 times. So if the students do some kind of error or some mischiefs in the classroom, there was a system of giving imposition. Write 100 times in the overnight. So students will not get time to sleep. 100 times they have to write. So repetition. So schools were structured in such a way that students should love repetition. They should understand that the whole life is a repetition. So repetition become a part of hidden curriculum. And then you look at this obedience, say for example, the industrial honest masters in the industrial society, disobedience of the factory laborers is a big issue. That was called as industrial indiscipline. So in factory, laborers should not question the masters. So they decided that laborers should have discipline. So future laborers also should have discipline. So then we developed discipline as a habit, as a virtue in the schools. So schools become the hatching centers of disciplined laborers. So we developed discipline through schools. Nobody will ask any question to the teacher. Nobody will ask any question to anybody. They are just disciplined human beings. So this was the result. So this was the purpose of curriculum, which was prepared by the industrial society at that particular time. And of course, that curriculum carries, and that curriculum was laden with the heavy politics of industrial society, heavy interests of the industrial society. But all the parents, all the students attended the schools thinking that this system is intended for developing you, for facilitating your growth, under the impression that we all have created an exodus to the educational institutions, and as a result, we believed that this system is going to benefit me. Of course, it benefited you through giving you some jobs in a factory so that your livelihood is being attended. But man as a creative organism was obstructed by the system of education, and it was the need of the industrial society. That obstruction was the need of the industrial society. So while talking about what should be taught in an organization, what should be taught in an organization, in a school, in a curriculum, we then understand that this question consists of a lot of politics that has to discuss with. And then why should it be taught, and whom should it be taught, and what does it mean to be? All these questions were laden with political interests of the dominant groups in our society. That's what I just wanted to discuss with you in this particular discussion about curriculum studies. I think I can give you some time. Everybody should switch on your voice now. Now you can speak and then ask questions to me. Please unmute yourself, everyone. Unmute and then ask questions.
Sir, this was the system all over the world or no? Only in India?
Across the world. This was actually
Across the world.
No, this was started in Europe basically.
Okay.
The system was started in Europe basically, and then of course America is basically is a community where these Europeans were inhabited. You know that Protestant Europeans came to America, and then Native Americans were tribals basically. It was a big continent without nobody living. Only the tribal Native Americans were there, and these tribal Native Americans were pushed to the their peripheries, and these European Protestants become stronger and stronger with the Columbus, with the coming of Columbus, and then because of the Protestant Catholic fight in Europe, a lot of Protestants came. So that's what America has become a major Protestant community. So that's how America become a European culture basically. America basically, there is nobody basically American. Everybody in different parts of the world. No, thoroughly there is no basically American. So whatever, it was everywhere in Europe, started in Europe, and which was spread to the world.
The schooling started before industrialization or during industrialization?
Before industrialization, education was a practice that you learn things through apprenticeship. You know what is apprenticeship? If I wanted to learn, the job of a carpenter, I go to a master of carpenter, stay with him, study. That was education. If I wanted to learn, Upanishad, I go to the house of the Guru, learn Upanishad. So there was no common central system of school. A common place where teacher comes morning, students joins in the morning. In the evening, all of them go back to their own home. This is the school system that we see today. That was not there before industrial system. If Sofair wanted to learn, the job of goldsmith, Sofair go to a person who is a goldsmith. You learn it and come back. If it is in a distant place, you stay with him and then come back. Learn and then come back. If it is close by, you stay with him as an apprentice. There was no theory paper. You learn by doing with him. And it's only after the Industrial Revolution, mainly this idea of school system as a formal education system has emerged. But of course, when you think about before that, formal systems were there. Say, for example, in the Athenia, during the period of sophist philosophers, and later, Plato started an educational institution which was called academia. It was like an academic organization, like our modern institution. And in India, Nalanda, Takshila was there. There were exceptions, but schooling was not a popular. This formal education was not a popular. Nobody goes to a Nalanda. Say, for example, there are 1 lakh people, only one person will go to Nalanda for learning philosophy. What is this philosophy? You should have enough money at your home to learn philosophy, because philosophy will not feed you. Only those jobs will feed you which you have to learn, do, and study with some masters. So only those people with rich, potential, or maybe so fascinated people only will go for philosophy studying and all these kind of techniques at that time. But the popular system, it has emerged only after Industrial Revolution.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
And then who else?
So,
Yes.
industrialization അതൊരു ശരിക്കും ഒരു അതോറിറ്റേറിയൻ ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് ഇതായിരിക്കും. ഒരു കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അതോറിറ്റേറിയൻ ടൈപ്പ് അല്ലേ ശരിക്കും?
Ade, because it is not a democratic anyway. It's not a democratic curriculum anyway. Authoritarian in the sense that some people will decide what others should learn. So in that way, it was a one-way authoritarian kind of a curriculum, where there was no democracy, there was no air of democracy into the dark rooms of curriculum construction at that time. Of course, it was decided by few, the so-called industrialists and the experts of the industrialists. Of course, it was an authoritarian. Since there is no discussion with the people, of course, that will be an authoritarian in the curriculum.
Okay, sir.
That would have been.
Okay, thank you.
ഓൺലൈൻ ക്ലാസ്സുകളിൽ ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കുന്നവർക്ക് തുറന്നു വരുമ്പോൾ മുട്ടായി കൊടുക്കുന്നതായിരിക്കും.
അപ്പുറത്തെ കരിക്കുലം ഒരു റോബോട്ടിക് ആണോ? ഒരു സ്റ്റുഡന്റിനെ ഒരു റോബോട്ടിക് സ്റ്റൈലിലേക്കാണോ മാറ്റുന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നത്?
എപ്പോൾ?
ഇൻഡസ്ട്രിയൽ റെവല്യൂഷൻ ആ ടൈമിൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്ന ആ ഒരു ലേണിംഗ് അപ്പോഴുണ്ടായിരുന്ന ഒരു സംഭവങ്ങൾ, എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ സിസ്റ്റം എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ പങ്ക്ച്വൽ ആയിരിക്കണം, ഒബീഡിയന്റ് ആയിരിക്കണം, റെപ്യൂട്ടേഷൻ, അങ്ങനത്തെ സംഭവങ്ങൾ നമുക്ക് അത് പഠിപ്പിച്ചില്ലായിരുന്നോ? അതുപോലെ ആ ടൈമിലുള്ള കരിക്കുലവും ആ കരിക്കുലം സ്റ്റഡീസും എല്ലാം അങ്ങനെ തന്നെയായിരുന്നോ?
Exactly. Because they wanted to hatch out the laborers for their industrial factories. So automatically, you can call them as a kind of a robots who are programmed through the process of education. So education was a program, software programming. So they will become obedient. They will love repetition. Any kind of difference, they will find it so dangerous. They will not like it. So tension. Say, for example, when new things comes up, they will get tensed. So
at that time, our education system is based on a skill. ഒരു പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ സ്കിൽ, ഒരു പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ ലേബറിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടല്ല ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത്.
Yes.
ഇപ്പം നൗഡേസ് ഇപ്പം വെച്ചാൽ ആഫ്റ്റർ +2 ആണ് നമ്മളൊരു കോഴ്സ് സെലക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അപ്പം ആ ടൈമിൽ തന്നെ ഒരു ചെറിയ പ്രായത്തിൽ തന്നെ ദേ വിൽ ബി ഒരു പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ സ്കില്ലിൽ സ്പെഷ്യലൈസ് ആവുന്നുണ്ട് അവര്. ഇൻഡസ്ട്രിയൽ റവല്യൂഷന് സമയത്ത് ഒരു പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ സ്കില്ലിന് വേണ്ടിയല്ല അവര് ലേണിംഗ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്.
അല്ല അവർക്ക് ജനറൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ ആദ്യം കൊടുക്കുന്നത്. ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞല്ലോ, ലിറ്റിൽ മാത്തമാറ്റിക്സ്, ലിറ്റിൽ സയൻസ്, ലിറ്റിൽ ഹിസ്റ്ററി, ലിറ്റിൽ സോഷ്യൽ സയൻസ്. So it was the concept of 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. That was started during this industrial revolution. So specialized job-based training was not part of their curriculum at that time.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
വേറെ ആർക്കും ചോദ്യങ്ങളില്ല? മുട്ടായി തരുമെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പോലും ആരും ചോദിക്കുന്നില്ല.
Hello, sir.
Yes. Leia?
Political interest വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് അവർ ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഇക്കണോമിക് ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റ് അല്ലേ ഫുൾഫിൽ ചെയ്യുന്നത്?
യെസ്, പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റും എക്കണോമിക് ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റും ഒക്കെ പരസ്പരം കോംപ്ലിമെന്ററി ആണ് ബേസിക്കലി. കാരണം ഈ പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റും എക്കണോമിക് ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റും പരസ്പരം സപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് നിലനിൽക്കുന്നത്. അങ്ങനെ സപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യാതെ അവയ്ക്ക് നിലനിൽക്കാനും പറ്റില്ല. അപ്പോൾ ഡോമിനന്റ് ക്ലാസ്സിന് എക്കണോമിക് ബെനിഫിറ്റ് ഉണ്ടാക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് അവരുടെ പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റ്. തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റും എക്കണോമിക് ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റിന്റെയും കൂടെ പരസ്പരം കോംപ്ലിമെന്ററി ആയിട്ടുള്ള വർക്കാണ് എഡ്യൂക്കേഷനിലൂടെ ഒന്ന് കണ്ടുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നത്. വേറെ എന്തുണ്ട്? വേറെ എന്തെങ്കിലും സംശയം? ഓക്കെ. നമുക്ക് നിർത്തിയാലോ? എന്നാ പിന്നെ സംശയങ്ങളൊന്നും ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ നിർത്താം. ചർച്ചയുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് കുറച്ചു നേരം കൂടെ തുടരാം. അപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് ഇതിന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് കുറച്ച് അസൈൻമെന്റുകളും പിന്നെ സെമിനാർ പ്രസന്റേഷൻസും ഒക്കെ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യണം. കാരണം ഈ പേപ്പർ ഏതാണ്ട് മുഴുവനും ഞാനാണ് എടുക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് അസൈൻമെന്റുകളും സെമിനാർ പേപ്പറുകളും കൂടെ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത്, നിങ്ങൾ കരിക്കുലം സ്റ്റഡീസിന്റെ സിലബസിലേക്ക് പോവുക. കരിക്കുലം സ്റ്റഡീസിന്റെ സിലബസ് പോവുക. പിന്നെ അതില് എല്ലാവരും ചെയ്യേണ്ട ഒരു അത്യാവശ്യമായിട്ടുള്ള സാധനം, മേജർ ട്രെൻഡ്സ് ദാറ്റ് ക്യാൻ ബി പെർസീവ്ഡ് ഫ്രം അവർ കണ്ടംപററി കരിക്കുലം കൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ പ്രാക്ടീസസ്. മേജർ ട്രെൻഡ്സ് ദാറ്റ് ക്യാൻ ബി പെർസീവ്ഡ് ഫ്രം അവർ കണ്ടംപററി കരിക്കുലം കൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ പ്രാക്ടീസസ്. രണ്ടാമത്തെ ലേണിംഗ് ആക്ടിവിറ്റി അതിനകത്ത് സെമിനാർ കൊടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നത് മൈ ഡ്രീം കരിക്കുലം, ഹൗ വിൽ ഇറ്റ് ലുക്ക് ലൈക്ക്. ഈ രണ്ട് അസൈൻമെന്റുകളാണ് ഉള്ളത്. നമ്മുടെ സെമിനാറാണ്, നമ്മുടെ ഈ പേപ്പറിന്റെ പാർട്ടായിട്ടുള്ള സെമിനാറാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഇത് സിലബസിന്റെ പാർട്ട് തന്നെയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ എല്ലാവരും അടുത്ത ആഴ്ച തൊട്ട് നിങ്ങൾ ഇപ്പോഴേ ഇതിന്റെ സെമിനാറിന് വേണ്ടിയുള്ള പ്രിപ്പറേഷൻസ് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യുക. പവർ പോയിന്റ് പ്രസന്റേഷൻസ് ഉണ്ടാക്കണം. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ റിട്ടൺ ആയിട്ടുള്ള അസൈൻമെന്റും തയ്യാറാക്കണം. അതിന് മാർക്കുള്ളതാണ്, ഇതിന് രണ്ടിനും മാർക്കുള്ളതാണ്. അപ്പൊ ആദ്യം ചെയ്യേണ്ടത് മേജർ ട്രെൻഡ്സ് ദാറ്റ് ക്യാൻ ബി പെർസീവ്ഡ് ഫ്രം അവർ കണ്ടംപററി കരിക്കുലം കൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ പ്രാക്ടീസസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന വിഷയത്തിൽ എല്ലാവരും സെമിനാറിന് തയ്യാറാവുക. മനസ്സിലാവുന്നുണ്ടോ? അടുത്ത ആഴ്ചയും കൂടെ എൻ്റെ ഈ ക്ലാസ് മുന്നോട്ട് പോകും. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് നമ്മൾ പതിയെ പ്രസന്റേഷൻസിലേക്കൂടെ പതിയെ പോകണം, ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ പ്രസന്റേഷൻസ് തീരാത്ത അവസ്ഥ വരും. അപ്പോൾ നെക്സ്റ്റ് ക്ലാസ്സിലും കൂടെ ഞാൻ ക്ലാസ് എടുക്കുകയായിരിക്കും. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് പതിയെ പ്രസന്റേഷൻസിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ പോകും. ആ പ്രസന്റേഷൻ നിങ്ങൾ പെട്ടെന്ന് തീർത്തു തരുമ്പോൾ മാത്രമാണ് ഇതിലെ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട പാർട്ടാണ് ഈ കരിക്കുലം തിയറി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് പെർസ്പെക്റ്റീവ്സ് ഓഫ് കരിക്കുലം. അതിൻ്റെ അകത്ത് പിന്നെ ഹബേർഷ്യൻ കരിക്കുലം, സോഷ്യൽ എഫിഷ്യൻസി മൂവ്മെന്റ്, പ്രോഗ്രസീവ് റിഫോം മൂവ്മെന്റ്, മൾട്ടി കൾച്ചറൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ, ക്രിട്ടിക്കൽ തിയറി, പാരഡൈം ഷിഫ്റ്റ്, ക്രിട്ടിക്കൽ പ്രാക്സിസ് പാരഡൈം, ഇതെല്ലാം ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ട്. അപ്പം നിങ്ങൾ ഈ ആദ്യത്തെ പാർട്ട് തീർന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മൾ ഈ ഡിസ്കഷനിലേക്ക് പോകും. അതിനുശേഷം വീണ്ടും രണ്ടാമത്തെ അസൈൻമെന്റ് അത് തീർത്തിട്ടുള്ള അതിൻ്റെ അടുത്തിലേക്ക്. അങ്ങനെയാണ് പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ അടുത്ത ആഴ്ചയും കൂടെ എൻ്റെ ക്ലാസ് ആയിരിക്കും. അതിൻ്റെ അടുത്ത ആഴ്ച തൊട്ട് നിങ്ങളുടെ പ്രസന്റേഷൻ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യും. പ്രസന്റേഷൻ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നത് ആൽഫബറ്റിക് ഓർഡറിലായിരിക്കും. അപ്പൊ അതുകൊണ്ട് എല്ലാവരും തയ്യാറായിരിക്കുക. ഒരാള് മിനിമം ഒരു 10 മിനിറ്റ് ടു 15 മിനിറ്റ് പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്യുക. ഒരു ദിവസം 5-6 പേർക്ക് നമുക്ക് പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും ഒരു ദിവസം. അപ്പൊ നെക്സ്റ്റ് മൺഡേയുടെ അടുത്ത മൺഡേയിൽ ഒരു എല്ലാവരും തയ്യാറായിരിക്കുക, എല്ലാവരും. അപ്പൊ ആരോട് ചോദിച്ചാലും വേണമെങ്കിലും പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്ന രീതിയിൽ എല്ലാവരും തയ്യാറായിരിക്കുക. ഓക്കെ
മേജർ ട്രെൻഡ്സ് അത് ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ 21st സെഞ്ചുറി സ്കിൽസ് അതെല്ലാം ഉൾപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ടുള്ളതാണ് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്.
അതെ 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 അതെ
ടോട്ടൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള കരിക്കുലം അല്ല, നമ്മൾ ഏതെങ്കിലും സെക്കൻഡറി ലെവലിലുള്ളത്, കോളേജ്, ഹയർ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ, ഏതാണ് പറയേണ്ടത്?
അത് നമ്മൾ ജനറൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള കരിക്കുലം ട്രെൻഡ്സ് എടുത്താൽ മതി. ഇപ്പോൾ ഓരോ സബ്ജക്ട് വൈസ് ആയിട്ട് ലെവൽ വൈസ് ആയിട്ടും അല്ല, കരിക്കുലം നിർമ്മാണത്തിലുള്ള പൊതു ട്രെൻഡുകൾ എന്താണെന്നുള്ളത്. അതായത് നമ്മൾ ആക്ടിവിറ്റിക്ക് കൂടുതൽ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് കൊടുക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, ഓൺലൈൻ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ്, അതൊക്കെ എല്ലായിടത്തും പൊതുവായിട്ടുള്ളതല്ലേ ഈ കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ. അപ്പൊ ലെവലല്ല ബേസ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടത്, കോമൺ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആസ്പെക്റ്റിലാണ് ബേസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ ഓക്കെ, ഹാവ് എ നൈസ് മൺഡേ.
താങ്ക് യു സർ.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shivaraja. Thank you, Prasanna. Thank you, Gopi. Thank you, Sharani.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bhavana. Surya, Anu, Sarayu, Maya, Cyril, Nadia, Drishya. Thank you all.